Hello, everybody. I'm excited to be here this week, Krystal. Really looking forward to this. We're going to be talking to Justin Jackson, and Justin Jackson is a running back with the LA Chargers, and he's also a political activist, and he's very involved. He was a big part of Force the Vote. He's the reason why Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, injected herself into the discussion. So, really fascinating guy. And listen, he's critical of the Republicans and the Democrats, but he's very sharp when it comes to calling out the Democratic BS. And, when you think about what's going on this week, the thing on the top of everybody's minds, if they follow these things as closely as we do, is the $2,000 checks. They backed off of a very clear-cut promise that they made. And we have the Warnock ad, which shows, I'm going to give you $2,000.
It's a literal picture of a $2,000, not a $1,400 check, of a $2,000 check.
You have Biden doing a rally in Georgia where he says, we are going to, quote, immediately get you a $2,000 check. And then you have Ossoff saying within the first, I can't say that name well. Ossoff. It always sounds slightly dirty. Assoff. And he was saying, we're going to get it to you within the next week or the first week.
Yeah.
So.
Liars.
All liars.
Total
all
liars.
Now, to be fair to Warnock and Ossoff, I did it again.
You did it. It's good. It sounded good to me.
to be fair to them, they did apparently call, Biden and Democratic leadership, and they were like, listen, we were crystal clear. We were on the record, son. We need to fight for this.
Yeah.
But, they're up against a tsunami now because Biden's backed off of it.
Right. So we already know he's backed off of the $2,000. Now it's $1,400. And look, the best that you can say is that there was some ambiguity about whether or not they meant a full $2,000 or you already got $600, so we'll give you another $1,400. But why do you want to seize on? Why are you looking for an excuse to do less?
Right. Yeah.
Just think about that mentality start. So they've already backed off of that. Then we start getting these reports of it's going to take some time, and maybe in March, maybe in April. Then we start getting reports that, actually, they didn't expect to win. So they don't really have a plan, right? So they were caught flat-footed was the term that they used in Politico, because they expected to lose, and then they thought they'd just have the excuse of, the Republicans are bad, and so we can't do anything. Oh, too bad. Sorry. We'd really love to, but we can't. So they're trying to figure this out, and the latest piece is that Biden comes out and says that he is willing to negotiate on more targeted checks. So decreasing the number of people further, they're already means tested, which I think they should be universal. Personally, you could tax it back, but just give everybody a check. They're already means tested. He wants to further negotiate down to an even more right-wing position. And then the last piece that I just saw is apparently they're still committed to trying to do this with the Republicans and begging and pleading, Republicans who are never going to come on board to try to get to 60 votes through regular order, rather than just doing it the way that Bernie Sanders has been saying from the beginning. Just do it through reconciliation, where you only need the Democratic caucus to come along and forget these people. They are not going to vote for your thing, no matter how many things you do for them.
But see, that's where I get conspiratorial, because I think there's a decent chance they fucking know that. They know they're not going to get to 60 votes. So what are they doing? They want to get the virtue signaling points of I proposed a thing that's good. See the good thing I proposed, which has a 0% chance of getting through. They want that when what they could have done is exactly what they said on the campaign trail, which is there's two ways you can go about it. One of them is day one, you propose a $2,000 check bill and you try to get through regular order. You're going to learn in 2 days you can't get through regular order, and then you immediately start the process for reconciliation. Or you could just start the process for reconciliation day one with $2,000 checks.
Right.
And that alone it would get you such a giant political victory on top of just the material benefit of now everybody in the country is going to be better off and they're going to view you as the hero. You know what I mean? It was so hard to fuck this up. You have to be so fucking dense to fuck this up.
Yeah.
You said $2,000 checks within the first week or immediately. Now you didn't do that. And now, if the Republicans are intelligent, they're not. But if they were intelligent, they could win on this alone. They could run ads just show this is what they said, this is what you got, But this idea of now we're going to make the $2,000 checks a $1.9 trillion bill with a lot of other stuff in it. Now there's good stuff in it, but That's not the same thing. Now it's something totally different. And even the people like Hawley who were on board for $2,000 checks, now they're not going to be on board for that.
Right.
So you can do that and try to get it through regular order. A COVID relief bill just passed. It was shitty, but a COVID relief bill just passed. They're going to do another $1.9 trillion bill like that? No. So it's almost like, and you tell me what you think, because is it that they're looking for a way to be like, whoopsies, we couldn't get it by, tee-hee-hee-hee-hee. Or are they really stupid enough to think, this has a shot? What fucking 9 Republicans are you going to get for a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill with $1,400 checks and had a $15 minimum wage in the fucking package? You're not even going to get, and I'm for that, of course.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get that with 60 fucking votes. Who's going to vote for your, Lindsey Graham is going to vote for your $15 minimum wage?
The only thing that you have any shot, and I think you and I assess the probability of this a little bit differently. The only thing you have any shot on getting 60 votes on is just $2,000 checks.
I don't even agree with you on that, yeah.
Because you have a number of Republicans who are in support of it, and because it is an 80% issue. So at the very least, people are going to be squirming about that vote. Now, probably you're right. In the end, you wouldn't get the votes because Republicans, unlike Democrats, are willing to take like a short-term hit in service of their long-term political goals. So they want to deny Biden any sort of a win. This would be a big win for him. Therefore, they're not going to do it. And they really obviously don't care about the people. But your question is really interesting of like, are they really this dumb?
Right. Yeah.
Like Joe Biden, after being in the Obama White House for 8 years and witnessing the bad faith and the total obstruction and unwillingness, I actually kind of think he is.
So you think it's stupidity and not virtue signaling.
He doesn't have an ideology. His only ideology is basically like, I'm the bipartisan guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he thinks of these people as like his friends, you know? And so I just think after 40 years in Washington, he can't let go of that thing. So I don't know about the other people around him, but I actually do think he is that stupid that he thinks he can maybe get these, if I give him this, if I give him that, Mitt Romney's a good guy, Lindsey Graham's my buddy, you know, Mitch McConnell and I actually work really well together. I actually think he's stupid enough to believe that if he keeps paring it back and paring it back and paring it back, he's going to get them on board. He's a fool.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I can't get over is that there's not a single person in the room who raises their hand and says, this is beyond stupid.
Sir, what are you doing?
Not a single one. You got a room full of 5, 6, 7 people. Not one of them is like, this is the dumbest thing anybody's ever done ever, you know? And to get back to your point on the 60 votes, I think with the Republicans, they will flip on a dime and use the most ridiculous arguments. Like, they'll immediately go back to like, the deficit's really bad. Have you seen this deficit?
Right.
Meanwhile, under Trump, they were like drunken sailors. It was just like, oh, a tax cut that blows a $2 trillion hole in the deficit where we give all the money to corporate America and the wealthy? Sure, bro.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so they're massive hypocrites.
Massive military spending, of course. They don't ever blink an eye at that.
I think you get 2 or 3 Republicans for the 60.
Well, we'll never know because they're not going to pursue an intelligent strategy. And I think it really is important to underscore this point. The most important thing here is that people are getting fucked, right? That's number one. People are getting fucked. But the political piece is just, it's so foolish. Every single political player who's messed with these checks has gotten burned. Every single one.
Manchin.
And let's start back in the fall. Like, first of all, I think the only reason Trump was as close as he was because he sent out one round of checks that had his name on it. Mm-hmm. If he had sent out another round, he'd probably be president again right now. Nancy Pelosi messed around, pretended like she was negotiating, and ultimately was the person that stood in the way of another round of checks going out. House Democrats barely hold on to their majority and just got really blown out in this election across the country. Then you fast forward to the next round of negotiations. Mitch McConnell tries to play cute, thinking that he's going to, remember how he did this? He tied a bunch of stuff together, these poison pills, so that it wouldn't, engineering it so it ultimately wouldn't pass, but so that his candidates in Georgia could go and say, oh, we voted for it. Look, we're really in support of it. Everybody saw right through it. They knew that it was the Senate Republicans who were standing in the way of those checks going out, and both of them in monumental, I mean, it was a close election, but the fact that the Democrats won both of those seats was a monumental upset. Like, that should not have happened. And so, once again, they're messing around with these checks, and they are trying their damnedest to rescue the Republicans from like political oblivion.
Yeah, and I guess the only silver lining is what happened with Joe Manchin. It was the ultimate like fuck around and find out moment.
Yeah.
Where, and shout out to Corbin Trent for apparently leading the charge on this.
Yep.
But basically what happened was they flooded the airwaves and put ads all over West Virginia that were like, this motherfucker just waffled on the $2,000 checks. What do you guys think of that? And Manchin was like, I'm kind of for it, though. I don't know why you guys are acting like I'm not for it, even though I just said I'm probably not for it. But I'm kind of for it now, so please back off.
No, his initial language was absolutely not. Direct quote when he gets asked about the checks, absolutely not. Almost instantly, he started to backtrack. He realized, I think from the social media backlash and whatever, or somebody around him was intelligent enough to be like,
don't do that.
No, don't do that. So they called back the Washington Post reporter to be like, when we said that, we actually meant a little bit something different. And then once the ads run, he fully walks it back and is like, no, I'm open to it. I just want to think about the targeting or whatever bullshit language he used. Ultimately.
That actually gives me hope. It gives me hope.
It should.
Because what it does is it shows like direct targeted campaigns have very beneficial effects where, but again, it all goes back to leadership and discipline. You have to be on message, completely on message. Everybody get on the same page, be aggressive, be direct. And then, apparently you could move these people, and that's a big thing that Justin cares deeply about, whether it's on Medicare for All and Force to Vote, whether it's on the $2,000 checks. And I think, he's a special guy, and I think he's going to win everybody over.
100%.
Absolutely.
One of the things that is positive, hopeful, optimistic about the Biden era versus the Obama era is there's a lot more Justin Jacksons out there. Even, the example with Corbin Trent, like there's a lot more like sort of official progressive infrastructure to do those kinds of efforts and ability to raise the grassroots money to push some of these politicians. And there's just a lot more people from the jump who are actually willing to say, yeah, you're a Democrat and you might be better than the Republicans, but that's not good enough. And we're going to hold your feet to the fire. So, Justin Jackson. Excited to talk to him.
All right, so I am super excited to welcome to the show LA Chargers running back and activist Justin Jackson. Justin, thanks for being here, man.
What's up? So good to see y'all finally get here to DC.
We owe you because you came from like 1,000 miles away to come see us.
Yeah, and happened to come on like literally the coldest day of the year. So welcome.
That cross country trip. I'm not I don't love flying. That's why I'm like,
I hate it, man.
Can we get some high speed rail? Because like I hate flying. I'd rather be on a train. But that is what the 4 or 5 hour flight. Then the 3 hour time difference is really what gets it.
Oh, so right now you feel like it's much earlier than it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like what would be like 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Are you a morning person or not?
Yeah, I get up pretty early because during the season I'll get up at like 5:45, and so then like my sleeping in off season is like 7.
Yeah, that's my schedule.
Do you sleep a lot? Like, do you feel like you need to get 8 or 9 hours in order to be at peak physical performance, or are you one of the like super sleepers where you get 4 and you're good?
No, I can't. I don't know how. I have teammates that'll do that. They'll go to bed at like 2 a.m. I'm like, because if I get less than like 6, I like to get between 7 and 8. If I get around 6, I like wake up. I'm like a zombie. It's hard to get through meetings. It's just like I need that sleep.
It's interesting how that works, right?
Yeah, totally. I'm that same way too, though. Like I can noticeably tell a difference in the way I feel, in like the way my brain works on the show, all that stuff. If I don't get enough sleep.
Yeah. So to give 2 examples on this, apparently there's one article I read about LeBron James that says he sleeps like 9 or 10 hours a day, which is like that's kid numbers. Like when you're a kid, you need more sleep. That's like kid numbers. And then the other end of the spectrum is Tiger Woods, who says he sleeps like 3 or 4 hours a night.
Wow, and they're both
the best of the best. So it's weird how that works, right?
Yeah, some people like they almost function better on less. I don't understand.
Trump said he gets like no sleep.
Yeah, well, and he's an amazing performer. I mean,
and he's in great physical condition.
Right? Yeah.
We should definitely model
he looks
our
great.
behavior on him.
Lard is looking on point.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Justin, for people who don't know you, just tell people a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you got into politics, how you got into football, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm from the suburbs of Chicago originally. My parents met in Chicago. My dad's from Detroit. My mom's side of the family is from Mississippi, moved to Chicago. So Midwest, we're definitely a Midwest family. I started playing football when I was 8. I actually started playing because I have an older brother, 2 years older. He like went in and signed up and everything, and I was mostly just like a gamer. I would just game. And and I was like, oh, I want to be like my brother. So then I was like, Dad, let me play. And that's just where it all started. And I've been playing football ever since, obviously. I went to college at Northwestern, then got drafted to go out to the LA Chargers. So I've been in LA for the past 3 years. As far as politics, I think the 2016 election was kind of my political awakening. I come from mainstream liberal family, but we never really talked about politics. The one political memory I think I remember is like when Obama got elected in 2008. Other than that,
How old were you in 08?
I would have been 12.
Oh my God.
Okay,
So very young. Yeah.
So did you get the signet, like how big of a moment it was? Or
I
what?
got the symbolic.
Right, the symbolic.
The symbolic effect of it, especially obviously being a young black person, right, in America. It's like, wow, like Obama got elected. It's like that huge symbolic cultural effect that, I really felt that. But I really didn't think about politics really until the 2016 election. And I think it was unique at Northwestern because we had a lot of conversations, and we would have 2-3 hour conversation in the locker room sometimes, but it was mostly about I feel like cultural ideology. Not really. Yep. No one really knew too much about politics or followed it. But I do remember, when obviously Trump was the nominee and Clinton was the nominee, and I was like, obviously I have to try and get people not to vote for Trump, right? But I'm like, so I have to get people to vote for Clinton. I was like, but I don't really know anything about Hillary, right? And so that's when I started looking for to learn more. And when I want to speak about something, I want to make sure I'm knowledgeable about it. So I didn't want to just be talking on my ass. And so I think I started watching MSNBC and CNN, and I realized they were just talking about Trump. They weren't talking about anything. I wasn't learning anything. So that's when I started going to YouTube and actually found.
I get it. Trump's bad.
Right.
What else can you tell me?
What else can you tell me so I can actually have a conversation with people and try and convince them to, be where I am as opposed to where they are right now. And it's different being in a college locker room, especially because we had people from Texas, Florida, Georgia, California, everywhere. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of different ideologies and personalities. So that's why I wanted to learn, really dig in and get into the weeds of everything. And that's where I found shows like TYT, like your show, Jimmy's show.
So it started with TYT, right? I feel like that's everybody's starts there.
That's where it started. And I really loved TYT because they had long segments about policy. And I was like, wow, I feel like I'm learning a lot. And it wasn't just, the sensationalism of mainstream news.
And this is 2015, 2016. So it's is it primary time or is it general election time?
Yeah, okay. I missed the primary. And it's funny because I remember one of my friends, his girlfriend was she's like, oh yeah, I'm voting for Bernie. I'm a Bernie person. And my friend, who's now very progressive, I think at the time I remember him being like, I don't know about Bernie because, that whole idea that he's too radical and all this type of shit, you know what I mean? And obviously now, I think we've both been kind of taken, a lot of us have been taken, especially young people, out of that, oh, Bernie's too radical. And now Bernie is, the man of the people, the man of the young people. But that was kind of the first introduction I had into lefty politics.
And so what was your experience like then when Trump actually wins in 2016? What did that feel like?
It was wild, especially being in college. I remember because Northwestern is a very liberal, elite liberal institution, and so there was literally some teachers were like, if you can't come to class because you're too distraught and too traumatized. And so I swear, I promise you.
Come on,
there were some professors that were canceling class for the rest of the week. It was wild. It was really a traumatic experience for a lot of people. And it's of course, you see a lot of people that, look at those institutions as, it's weird coming into it from a perspective of not knowing before. But then I think of people like yourself who went through the Obama years and everything and actually understand the dynamic of everything. And then you hear that and you laugh.
Right. Yeah.
But when you're in it and you don't know, it's okay, I guess people are really traumatized. They're really scared, and all this type of stuff when it's really both sides are way more similar than you think.
That's true. So you seem to, one of the things I noticed about you right away when we started talking is that you really focus like a laser on policy. Yeah. And you were like, when I wanted to learn about it, that's the first thing you went towards was policy. Yeah. So walk me through you're learning during the general election of 2016, you're learning about Trump, you're learning about Hillary. And then when you finally started getting the facts of it, walk me through that. How'd you feel about that? Did you vote for Hillary, or did you sit it out, or what?
I actually didn't. I sat it
You
out.
sat it out? Okay.
I sat it out because I just had learned so much, and especially for me and my family, you know, coming from the inner city of Chicago, my mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family coming from the inner city of Detroit, right? Like, I understand what a lot of these policies that were pushed, you know, under Bill Clinton, you know, during the Bush years and during the Obama years, how, like, both sides, like, you know, these cities remained exactly the same throughout both Republican and Democrat administrations,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm seeing, like, how am I going to be out there pushing people to vote for someone who I know has had very, very adverse effects on communities like mine, like that my parents came from. You know what I mean? So I didn't feel comfortable, kind of similar with Biden. I didn't feel comfortable going out there telling people to vote for this person because, to me, a vote is an endorsement.
Right.
Like, a vote is saying.
So you own what they do.
Right, you have to, you know what I mean? Like, but I didn't say, you know, didn't say don't vote for Biden, like, because I understand the you know, who Trump is and what he brings to the table and everything he did over the past 4 years. So I really felt like I was between a rock and a hard place, and I felt like that in 2016 as well, just from learning all the true policies that not only that she had supported in the past, but that she would be supporting in the future. And she was very hawkish, and that. For me, like, being anti-war is a very big thing for me.
So was it the Iraq War that made you say I can't do it, or was it outsourcing? Like, what? Was it everything?
It's
like,
everything.
It was
the
everything.
Iraq
Okay.
War, you know, NAFTA, and then especially, like, things like welfare reform, right? Because a lot of, when you think about welfare and welfare queens and all this type of rhetoric, and that mostly goes against, you know, poor Black and brown people, and so that you know, turned that, you know, I guess it makes my skin crawl, as they would say about Bernie on MSNBC.
Well, the funny thing about what you're saying is it's like the polar opposite of what we're often told about people who didn't vote for Hillary and didn't vote for Biden. It's like, oh, well, they must have all this privilege and come from this background that just enables them to not really care about all the hardships. And what you're saying is like, no, I actually didn't vote for them because of what I've seen in my own life and in my own community. It's the polar opposite of the narrative you normally hear.
100%. And I think a lot of times we think about these numbers, right? Like 68,000 people die from, you know, not having healthcare in the richest country in the world. Like, we think about it as almost as abstractions, and then but those are real people with real lives, right?
Tell the story of your mom.
Right. So when I was 3 years old, my mom passed away from breast cancer, and obviously being super young, I don't have a lot of memories about it. But once I got older, I started, you know, questioning or asking questions to my family members, because I wanted to understand kind of the financial hardship that, you know, potentially put our family in, because, you know, my parents and my dad didn't tell me much about, like, finances at the time. So what I learned was, not only obviously on top of the traumatic effect of losing a parent, losing a wife, losing a daughter, all this type of stuff that my family had to go through, my mom was worried while she was fighting that cancer, worried about, oh, what is this going to bankrupt our family?
Ugh.
Right? As she's 30 years old, about to leave her family, she's worried about money.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, it's so sickening. But that's the reality of the situation we lived in. And that was in 2000. It's exactly the same. There's hundreds of thousands of more families that have went through that same trauma. And it's like, so it's hard for me to go out there and tell people who have went through that, oh, you have to vote for Joe Biden, who doesn't support legislation that would prevent that from happening.
Said he would veto it.
Said he would veto it. If it came to his desk and he had the power to help all these people in this country, he said he would veto it. Like, think about the power of that, right? And it's like, that doesn't not sit well with me. And so that's why I fight so hard on these fronts, because I want people to realize that, yes, you can hate the Republicans, all good and fine, but these Democrats are in power right now and have the ability to help people. And if they're not going to do it, if they're not willing to do it because of all their influences, then you need to be willing to call that out.
It strikes me you guys both have actually kind of similar stories.
Should I tell my dad's story?
Yeah.
I've told this a number of times. I don't tell it too much because there is a degree of, like, ambiguity. Like, I don't really know what would happen, but, you know, my dad had extreme back pain when he was 56 years old, and he kept going to this chiropractor over and over. And the reason he was doing that is because the chiropractor is inexpensive,
right?
And he could afford it, and he didn't have insurance, and he was told by the chiropractor, like, oh, don't worry, we'll take care of it, you'll be fine in a little bit. So he kept going to this chiropractor. Anyway, eventually Eventually, he had to go to the emergency room because the pain was so excruciating. They found out it was a tumor that had started in his lungs and metastasized to his spine. And, he was dead weeks later. And so, I always say part of it is the fact that, yes, he was not generally pro-science, so he's not maybe the best example of somebody who would have been by the book. But, again, if it was free for him to go to a real doctor, would he have gone to a real doctor earlier? Maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe he would have.
chance.
So, it's a similar experience to what you went through, but it's just gross, man.
It's heartbreaking.
And these things, people think these things are debatable.
Right.
Like, no, every other developed country has universal health care.
Yeah.
We can't do it in this country. You said the numbers, 45,000 to 68,000 die every single year from lack of health care.
Real people.
We can fix that. It's not even hard to fix that. We can fix that.
And it saves money.
That's right. It's $5 trillion.
Saves money.
Over a decade.
Right. And to just say, well, the Democrats are a little better than the Republicans on it, which they are, isn't sufficient. When you have in your, let's just be clear about this right now. Joe Biden and the Democrats have in their power the ability to give every person in this country emergency Medicare.
Yep.
They could do it right now through budget reconciliation, even through an executive order. They could do it. They make an affirmative choice not to. And then people get mad at you, get mad at you, get mad at me when we call them out for that.
Right. And the thing that makes me so upset is that we have the ability to actually put pressure on them, right? Because like you said, it's an affirmative choice. Biden can either choose to do Bernie's Medicare expansion in the COVID relief bill, or he can choose to subsidize Cobra and just hand money to, these insurance companies, which are still going to increase premiums and squeeze people who can't afford it out from getting healthcare during a pandemic. It's sickening, right?
Yeah.
That's a choice he's making. And if we're not willing to call him out and not willing to put pressure on him, just like people are doing with Manchin, with the $2,000 checks and some of these other things, if we're not willing to do that, then we're part of the problem. And that's why I talk so much to progressives in Congress, because before we didn't have a voice. Nancy Pelosi doesn't care if we're talking to her. So some of these corporate Democrats, they don't feel that pressure. They get ratioed every single day on Twitter. They don't care. They just keep going, right? But we actually got these progressives in the halls of power that can fight for us. And what I'm trying to do, and I think what a lot of people just in the lefty space are trying to do, is make sure that they don't get caught up in the DC bubble and they remember the real pain that people are feeling right now and how people can't wait. People can't wait 5 to 10 years for some of this legislation. They need it now. And how am I going to tell this person who doesn't have health care in the middle of a pandemic that they have to wait and just be okay with Biden and what he's doing and what the Democrats are waiting a month or two on the stimulus checks and stuff like that? I can't tell people who are hurting right now to wait. They don't have time to wait. And so I need to make sure I'm applying that pressure to those people in power so they understand the real, hurt and struggle that people are going through on the ground.
Yeah. So when Biden goes out and says, we're going to get the checks out immediately.
Right.
And then we hear, well, by immediately, we meant maybe our March, maybe April. And oh, by the way, when I said 2,000, I really meant 1,400. And oh, by the way, we're going to further target the checks, meaning that they're going to go to fewer people. It really does kind of blow my mind, because this one is so clear. Not only are they moving the direction of doing the wrong thing and also just being complete liars in terms of what they promised the public, but this is a political disaster. You made a really clear promise, and yet you're looking for every excuse to try to walk away from it.
And let me just add to that one thing. I saw earlier today, Ossoff and Warnock are mad. They called Biden
what are you doing?
Right.
They'll lose re-election if they don't get the $2,000 checks out, because the ads were crystal clear. Warnock's ad said, I'm going to give you a $2,000 check.
Right.
Literally.
Not
Exactly
1,400.
that.
And Ossoff said, Ossoff is on video saying, next week, meaning the first week of the Biden administration, we'll get you that $2,000 check. And then nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. And like I said, there are people, we have to think about it. This is January, so 10 months almost of COVID, and people got $1,200, maybe some unemployment,
and then $600,
and then the $600, and that's it. And then they said these are going out immediately. These people needed the money right now, right? So every single day you wait is another day that people are running out of money to feed their family. This is not a joke, right? And it's politics is such a game to people that have been in the DC bubble for so long, like Joe Biden, who's been there for 40-some years. It's a game to them, it seems like. These are real people's lives. People are waiting on this money so they can literally feed their family, pay rent, whatever they need to do to survive in America, right? So, you're patting your feet and you're doing, you're talking about impeachment. You're talking about all these other things. People need money. Right? Okay, cool. You're trying to prevent Trump from running again in 4 years. Well, people aren't worried about that right now when they're worried about feeding their families.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the Democrats need to understand, is that if they keep doing stunts like this, they're going to completely lose their base. And like you said, it's a political win. It's a win-win for them.
Yeah.
They get the credit for giving people money, and they can further entrench their base for the next elections. It's a win-win, so why aren't they doing it?
Yeah, I mean, in a very real sense, the checks have become the most potent political issue in American politics. I mean, you could make an argument. The reason Trump came as close to winning as he did in the fall is because checks went out that had his name on it.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that Democrats did so poorly in the House and the Senate is because they played a bunch of games, pretending to be negotiating, but ultimately standing in the way of another stimulus deal before the election. And then the two Republicans lose their seats in Georgia because McConnell tried to play cute with the checks in December. I saw someone on Twitter saying that with regards to the GameStop situation, they were like, let's just send the hedge funders $600.
Right.
They'll be fine. Just send them $600 checks. Don't worry about it. They'll be fine.
They got to budget a little bit better. Maybe not have an iPhone.
What do you make of that whole mess, the GameStop thing, and then how they're reacting? I could say what I'm amazed by is that, like, the rigging is out in the open.
Oh my gosh, it's so
totally blatant.
Everyone's paying attention to.
Yeah,
It's not even in the back room. It's in the front room for everybody to see the rigging.
Just ban buying it. Just ban buying
That
shares of
specific
GameStop
stuff.
and AMC, and just ban it. And then they do it. And then come to find out that app was funded by the hedge funds that are losing a shitload of money right now.
Of course. No, it's wild. I think it's actually, I'm very encouraged to see how many people from like either apolitical or both sides of the spectrum are kind of enraged by this, because it's like like you said, it's a clear shot of the little guy actually beating the big guy, right? They lost, and you think about it, they lost billions of dollars, and even some of these people made millions or hundreds of thousands or even a little bit of money. Like, that's still a huge difference in money, right? Like, billions versus millions is a big difference. And like, even despite all that, they're coming out, like you said, it's brazen, it's out in the open, and I think people are paying attention. And I'm maybe this can be the little spark we needed. I don't know. I'm always looking for these things, but I do think that this is a good signal of how we can work outside of electoral politics to affect electoral politics towards our side. So I'm hoping that we could do more stuff like this in the future that can really affect this. And like you said, it's just so it's so amazing to watch these billionaires go on CNBC and complain
so
and bitch. And the funniest thing was the guy's like, that fair share stuff is bullshit. And then 5 seconds later, he's like, we all got to pull together. Like, as soon as he started losing, it's that meme where they're like, it's like my profits, and then it's like our losses.
What is that guy's name? Leon Cooperman. He's the same one. Remember back in the Democratic primary, he went on CNBC and was literally crying because of Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax. Not that you have anything to worry about with Elizabeth Warren, by the way. But he's like literally crying about how unfair it is and how their billionaires are so vilified. Oh, the class warfare. It's horrible.
And then the former SEC chairman coming out and like comparing it to the insurrection.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But this is how they view it, though. You have to really understand, like, this is the lens they view these things from.
It's so telling.
It is an attack on their very being. That's how they feel.
Again, the rigging's out in the open. So you have these hedge funds, you have these giant financial institutions, and they pay the politicians.
Right.
They're in bed together. So, like, honestly, and think of the optics of it, right? Because it's so easy to dupe people on this, because when you look at Wall Street, it's a bunch of guys in suits and ties who are, like, all proper and whatnot. And you go to a Reddit board and they're, cursing and saying politically incorrect things. And so, like, they'll take that out of context and be like, well, obviously these guys are the bad guys. But it's like, they're doing the shit that you set up the rules for.
Right.
So now they're beating you at your own game, and they're like,
And
oh,
you're
we
mad
obviously got
about
to
it.
change
We
the
gotta
game now.
Yeah. Right. We need regulation.
Right.
We
It's all
need
of
it
a
right
sudden
now.
regulation.
Right.
And they're like, I'm not for that much regulation, but right now we need this regulation.
Right.
It's awesome to watch. It's crazy that they were able to do this. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the other piece of it was, so first you have the piece of Robinhood app just saying like, no, you can't buy GameStop and you can only close out your position.
Right.
Then I saw that they were actually forcing people people to sell.
Really?
Which is, again, like these hedge funds have to close out their position. And if people aren't willing to sell, they're basically, I mean, they're completely screwed, right?
Right.
And then on top of that, then everyone goes in like, we're going to fuck them up on their ratings and give them 1-star ratings. And Google comes in and says, we're going to delete all of those. Those don't count. We're gonna
Literally a
delete all-"
cabal.
It's a cabal.
literal
It's
cabal.
an elitist cabal.
They all like called each other and were like, we got to take care of this situation. And they did.
And they
I mean,
did.
just like that. There's this quote that's like, if you don't move, you don't feel the chains. You don't notice the chains, right? And that's what happened here. These Redditors moved around just a little bit, and suddenly you see exactly how the game is set up so clear. You have the illusion of you can get ahead.
Right.
You have the illusion of, oh, it's all fair play, and these guys making billions, it's just because they're such brilliant geniuses.
Right.
But the minute you flip the game on them, nope, we can't have that.
And you know what? It's a lot like 2008, right? Like the way it unfolded in 2008, even people who were like half paying attention, you could see that these companies made terrible decisions that bankrupted their companies, crashed the world economy, and then what happened? The government rushed in, bailed them out, and then they paid bonuses to the same people who made all the decisions that bankrupted the companies.
Right.
It's criminal.
No criminal accountability. No one went to prison, and bunch of people lost their homes, lost their wealth, right? And some of those people were, you know, it was their parents who were losing their homes, and now they're the ones on the Reddit board like, fuck you.
Yeah.
They've seen how this all works. So it is an incredible moment. And Justin, part of what I found really interesting about it is there was this weird, like, unity. There was like a weird sort of coalition of people across all kinds of political lines that came together around this thing of like, fuck this system. Because that is an incredible majority of Americans feel that exact way.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially after 2008 and all the information that came out with it, and you know, with movies like The Big Short and stuff, I think it helped regular people kind of, because they make, even explaining the stock market, it's so hard. Like, even I don't know a lot about it. They purposely make it super difficult so that people that are uneducated about it don't know how to work it, right? And so I think after 2009, people really saw like, no, it's simple. They were cheating. Their whole business model was fraud, and they got bailed out after it. And so I think just another example where everyone can come together. Like, okay, maybe we don't agree on certain things here or there, but we can all agree that we're all getting screwed by Wall Street.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the government will always rush in and protect them because they're all friends. They all go to the same parties. Like you said, think about this. This affected, right, a few hedge funds from this one stock and some of the AMC, some of the other stocks. But somehow they had connections to the SEC. Somehow they had connections to Google. Somehow they had connections to Robinhood. Just of these few hedge funds, right? So they all rush in to protect each other. At the end of the day, that's what it's always going to be.
Yep.
That's
Class
right.
allyship right there.
And the details of what they did with Robinhood, out of this world, because apparently they were feeling the pressure from everybody and they were like, we got to ease the restrictions and let people buy GameStop and let people buy AMC. And then they got a phone call, and the phone call was the hedge funds, and the hedge funds said, we're going to give you $1 billion. And so they kept the restrictions on and took the $1 billion. It literally is an elitist cabal, and if anything, I feel silly and naive for underselling just how much of an elitist cabal it is. Yeah,
exactly right.
For sure.
So what do these type of conversations look like in the locker room? You're talking about when you were at Northwestern. Now, have you seen a shift in political consciousness since the Trump era, since the Black Lives Matter protests over the summer? Talk a little bit about that dynamic.
I think definitely with Black Lives Matter, if I start there, there was a shift in the sense that a lot more players were speaking out and willing to speak out. And there was a video that a lot of players did, like right in the midst of all the protests, where it was like Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, like just some of the most biggest names in the NFL were coming out and speaking out about it. And I was like, it just felt really relieving for me because it's like, sometimes I wonder, like, what's it going to take to just get more people to talk, like speak out and talk about it. And I think because our culture, people are so apolitical, and I don't really blame them, particularly because, like I said, a lot of us come from these communities where there's been Republicans, there's been Democrats, nothing really changes, and so a lot of people have kind of walked away from politics.
Yeah.
But I think Black Lives Matter for sure brought that back to the forefront. Obviously, I wish more could have came out of that.
Let me pause on that one for a second. Was it ever tense? I mean, because that is one of the things that I feel like, football is almost unique in the fact you really have a vast variety of backgrounds, of races, of religions, of everything represented. So was it tense at any point?
Yeah, the thing that's very encouraging is that it wasn't. Like, even people who I know are, Trump supporters and whatnot were in support of, us using our voice, of protesting, even if they
That's
necessarily didn't want to speak out themselves. They were encouraging and had, the backs of people who did want to speak out, which, that solidarity, it's amazing to see, and we need more of that, particularly when it comes to issues that, are outside of Black Lives Matter and actual political issues. We need more solidarity on that front. I will say with the Trump era, more people were paying attention.
Yeah.
Just because of the spectacle of it, right? And more people were paying attention, so I could actually have conversations with people that actually knew more than I thought they would, because they were paying attention a little bit closer simply because of Trump. And that, like I said, that's something that was encouraging, and I like having conversations, and I think I'm more geared to be able to have conversations with people that aren't in my same ideology, because I grew up and have been inhabited these spaces with people, like you said, from all different walks of life, different areas, different backgrounds and ideologies. So I know how to kind of talk people maybe away from their position without first coming out saying they're a racist because they support Trump or X, Y, and Z. Like, you can't just name call at the beginning, because then people shut down. They go back to their talking points and not really willing to have that conversation. And I think I have, and other people that kind of agree with me have been able to kind of move people on the issues. I'll give you an example. One guy who is a Trump supporter, I talked to in the locker room, and I talked to him about the tax cut bill. And, he makes probably between $10 and $20 million a year. And I was like, so, he was saying, oh, don't vote for Biden. He's going to raise taxes in California to 60%. I'm like, trust me, I don't think Biden's going to raise taxes.
He's not going to do anything, so don't worry.
But, he's watching Fox News and listening to all this stuff. So I was like, so the Trump tax cut, you agree with that, right? Yeah, of course I agree with that. Okay, so how much money did you get back on your taxes? He's like, well, actually, I had to pay more because they closed some of the loopholes that you could with like charities and stuff like that. So I'm like, so think about it. If you make between $10 and $20 million and your taxes, you didn't even get a cut on your taxes, who do you really think those tax cuts were for?
Mm-hmm.
People that make the tippy top. Exactly. So I think if you can kind of put it in plain terms and actually, speak to how it affects their lives personally, they can kind of step back and be like, whoa. Maybe I don't agree with that. And you're not always going to change people's mind right away, but if you can kind of get them to step back and maybe reevaluate. I've had people come to me 5-6 months later like, wow, that talk you had with me, like, it actually changed my mind, and now I agree with this point or agree with that point. And that's how you have to change people's minds. And I know you've done it on your show. I'm sure you've done it on your show as well. But you have to be able to talk to these people across the aisle, across all different spectrums, and they're just people. You can't think of them as like this racist Trump supporter who was at the Capitol doing insurrection. Like, that's a very small group of the Republican base, in my belief.
So, and to bolster your point there, yeah, the corporate tax rate, I believe, went from 35% nominally to 25% nominally. But with all the loopholes in the corporate tax, It gets down to a lot of these corporations pay effectively zero tax.
I think there was a record number of Fortune 500 companies that paid
It's just unbelievable.
Which is disgusting.
So do you sense a shift? Because you were saying that originally a lot of the talk in the locker room is like on social issues and it's more cultural. Do you sense a shift at all where, like, because now you said you're bringing up economics behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So do you sense a shift where now once people start talking about economics, they realize like, oh shit, it's the elites versus the people. It's not even left versus right.
Yeah. I think that's tough because obviously a lot of the people in NFL locker room make a lot of money, right? And so I've seen some people who you wouldn't expect are Trump supporters who are his loudest supporter. Yeah. And money does change a lot. But I will say that during the election, like, I had a lot of conversations, with my teammates, and they were like, I don't think I'm voting for anybody this time, just because Biden was such, a figure that a lot of, especially black people, know that, he might have been Obama's VP, but a lot of us know about his record. So I do think I feel a shift away from like just, oh, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, is more so like the step. I think we're one step away. They've taken a step away from like, oh, one side versus the other, and now they're like, I don't agree with either side. I'm gonna sit out, and now we just got to get them to be like, no, there is a side for you. There's a space for you. But it's tough because obviously Bernie's somewhat in the Democratic Party, but I think with a figure like him arising, that people can be like, well, I don't really agree with mainstream Republicans or Democrats, but I can agree with someone like Bernie, who has very sensible, internationally moderate left policies that aren't this crazy radical thing. But you have to break it down for them, because a lot of times they'll be like, I'll talk about universal health care and they'll be like, oh, that sounds like socialism. And I'm like, oh my God, but you have to kind of just massage
walk them through it.
Walk them away from kind of the propagandized view that we have.
Justin, it's my understanding that if you don't support Joe Biden, then you ain't black.
Right, exactly. No, and that was another thing that I think. I mean, the Breakfast Club is a big podcast that a lot of black people watch, and so seeing him say that, it's like
excuse you?
Right, like what?
It's that entitled attitude.
Yeah.
Like, I'm entitled to your support.
Yes.
Like, what are you doing questioning me? Yeah, okay, sure. I wrote the crime bill and
right.
locked up all these black and brown people.
Right.
But are you black or not?
Right, exactly. I think that was one thing. I mean, the poor kids and the white kids.
That comment.
That's just a horrifying comment. But just like, I mean, they call them gaffes, but I think it's when he accidentally says exactly what he's thinking.
It's a little too revealing.
Yeah. So I think that definitely was revealing for a lot of people and changed their minds.
So talk a little bit about your sort of theory of change, because you're on the board of the People's Party. You're an advisor to the People's Party, which is the third party effort. I mean, do you think that's the direction of totally breaking from the Democratic Party? Do you think it's possible to reform from within? Like, I know you were very involved with Force the Vote, trying to get the progressive members to use the leverage that they have today to get things accomplished. Just talk about your views there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the third party avenue is one we should definitely explore, simply because why not, right? Like, if you can actually have a party that can threaten even a small percentage of the Democratic vote, you almost have to move towards a parliamentary system that they have like in the UK or whatever, where they have to build a coalition. Now, of course, the Democrats are going to beat that down as hard as possible, because they don't want anyone threatening their power and the duopoly of the two parties. But I mean, if we can get that off the ground, then why not? Now, am I exclusive to that? No. I think obviously that is a super long shot. I don't think that means you don't try, but it is so hard. Just the barriers to entry in our political system is very difficult. So that's why I tend to try and pressure the Democratic Party. I love the idea of the Justice Democrats. I love the idea of trying to pull the party left from within. I think policy-wise, the Justice Democrats have done that. I think if you didn't have any Justice Democrats, I think you would have got the climate plan at least better, to the point where it is right now.
Yeah,
I don't think
true.
so.
That's true.
I think you have to have those pressures, and I think those pressures are working to a certain extent. I think to actually overcome the influence that money and corporations have on someone like Joe Biden, you can't just work behind the scenes. You can't, because at the next chance they have to screw you, they will, right? And so my theory, and I think a lot of people, will agree with this, and it's not my theory, it's just one I subscribe to, is that you have to use the leverage and power that you have, right? Mm-hmm. What is the leverage and power that the left has? The left barely has any institutional power. Mm-hmm. They have maybe 10 real progressives in the House, Bernie, maybe Elizabeth Warren, maybe in the Senate, right? If you think that you're just going to be able to grow that until the point of where we actually take it over, that's going to take maybe 100 years. Like, if we're being honest, just because the amount of time, money, and effort it takes even to win one or two of these races against the incumbent entrenched corporate Democrats. So what you have to use is shows like this, right? Shows that have millions or hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Those are real people, right, who have a real effect on politics. And if you can use that lefty media infrastructure and your grassroots organizations like the Nurses Union and DSA, like if you can actually have calls to action, then that actually pressures the people in power. Like I said, I think Joe Manchin is a great example. He comes out, fervently against the $2,000 checks. Later that day, he's forced to issue a statement simply because of pressure, mostly online, and you have to actually threaten their power, right? Their seats. And if you can actually go out there and say, look, Joe Biden is pushing this plan for his COVID relief healthcare plan that's going to give massive subsidies to corporations, and it's going to squeeze even more people out. You're still going to have to pay the premiums, deductibles, all that stuff. Or there's this plan that Bernie has that's a Medicare expansion that's actually going to give more people healthcare through the government. That's an active decision Joe Biden is going to be making. Now, what are we doing to pressure him into making the right decision?
Right.
If we're just working behind the scenes and not actually putting anything out there and putting any political pressure on him, he's going to make the decision he's made for the last 40 years.
Absolutely.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I know with Force the Vote and everything, I know, we had our strategy, and I don't think it's completely right to say that progressives don't have any strategy. I think they do have a strategy. I think Pramila Jayapal's interview with Marianne Williamson was very telling. I suggest everyone go watch that. She talks about, how they work through the task forces. They have all these commitments, et cetera, all fine and great. She says she has 3 pages long about the commitments she got from Biden. I'm like, okay. But my thing is, like, why does it seem like they never want to clue anyone else in, right? It's like, we're here to help you pressure him, but it's almost like they never want to use us to help them along the way. And it's like, if you think you're just going to work behind the scenes and play patty cake with Nancy Pelosi and you're going to eventually get what you want, you're fighting against a system with billions of dollars in it, with people that have been in politics forever, who, have their ideology and what they want to push. And if you're not going to actually put any pressure on them from the outside, that there's not enough pressure you can place on them from the inside to actually get any real change.
Yeah, there's very little institutional power that progressives have. They have a toehold. That's what they have. Tiny bit. But they have the people.
Right.
So
that's their leverage.
So use that. And I actually think, I was just thinking about this while you were talking, like the GameStop thing is actually an interesting example of that, because you have people like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, who's, libertarian extraordinaire, jumping on this because there is so much public energy behind it. So even the very people who were instrumental in rigging the system to be what it is feel like they at least have to publicly signal that they're on the right side of this thing. In addition to the example that you give of the $2,000 checks, it shows you that when you have an overwhelming consensus around something and that kind of visible public pressure, every politician is going to bend.
So you guys are both you're both hitting on the exact point of what Justice Democrats was supposed to be about. It's supposed to be a Tea Party of the left. It's supposed to be a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. And unfortunately, happens to the best of them. They get to D.C. and all of a sudden they have D.C. brain and they think, well, if I go tit for tat and if I meet with them behind the scenes, then maybe I'll be able to, in the long term, maybe I'll be able to get more concessions that way. And really, at the end of the day, it's just a boatload of rationalizations, and they don't end up getting nearly enough. So the problem is twofold as I see it, and you guys both kind of hit on it. It's leadership and discipline. So you need leadership. You need somebody who really sees the whole vision and can see the whole chessboard and can be a leader and use the bully pulpit and the power of the people. And the other thing is discipline. Listen, as lefties, this is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing that we're all independent thinkers and we try to come to our own conclusions and everything. But yeah, sometimes you need discipline. Sometimes you need like a dozen of them to get on the same page, and you're all one. You're all of one mind, and just like they're saying with the Wall Street Bets thing, hold the line.
Right.
Go out there, hold the line, say, no, you're going to give us a vote on Medicare for all. Because you know what? There's a pandemic, and people are dying every single day. And I'm supposed to believe it's crazy to have a vote on universal health care in the middle of a pandemic when we're the only developed country that doesn't have it in the first place? So that's the problem. There's no leadership and there's no discipline. And until we get those things, unfortunately, the conversations that we're having now are all going to be outside of the power centers. And inside the power centers, you'll have silly sniping at each other on Twitter.
Yes, which is incredibly productive. I mean, hopefully Nina Turner would be that leader
I hope.
if she's able
I
to
hope.
make it to Congress, because part of the problem, I think, in terms of the DC brain that you're talking about, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but it's not that they have bad intentions, but they don't fully recognize who their enemy actually is.
Yes.
That's it.
Whereas Nancy Pelosi sees them as the enemy. She may be very nice to their face. She's doing little things behind the scenes to try to ingratiate herself to them, but she sees them as the enemy, and she will do whatever she can to quash them. And I'm waiting to see what she does to try to keep Nina Turner from getting to Congress, by the way. But they don't have quite that clarity of the battle lines and where they are ultimately drawn, because they buy a little bit too much into the idea that it's enough that the Democrats are better than the Republicans, and they are better than the Republicans. I don't want to pretend like they're equivalent. They're absolutely not. I would rather have Joe Biden there than Donald Trump. I would rather have Chuck Schumer than Mitch McConnell. I'd rather have Nancy Pelosi than Kevin McCarthy, I guess. But, but ultimately that's not sufficient. And what ends up happening is more sort of like signaling around what you would like to do if only you didn't have, X, Y, and Z excuse that they always have lined up for why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, and the argument for push Biden left, I thought that was an argument. I doubted that he could be pushed left, but if you're telling me that once he gets elected, which is what they were going out and telling a lot of their constituents, we're telling you to vote for Joe Biden, and don't worry, once he gets in there, we're going to push him to the left. Well, how do you expect to do that if you're not actually going to call him out, right? Like when he says he's going to push for the public option, that's what he's campaigning on, and then the first chance of him doing any type of health care, he is pushing more money into Cobra, which is already way too expensive for a lot of people and can't afford it. Well, then I need to hear you talking, right? I need to hear you talking about that. So that's what frustrates me, is that it seems like they're unwilling to criticize the powers that be, because they feel like, we've worked with him before and we don't want to make him mad because then he might not do what we talked about before and all these commitments that we got before. And that's just so, to me, very politically ignorant.
Yeah.
You just look at history. Like that's never worked in the past, right? The only time if you're fighting the system, right, which is what essentially the progressive agenda is supposed to be doing. If you're doing that, then you're never going to win by working strictly within that system.
What type of vitriol have you faced for daring to criticize Joe Biden or the Democrats?
A lot. I mean, I get people that all the time just say, why are you always criticizing progressives and Democrats? You never talk about Republicans. I'm like, do you think Lindsey Graham gives up what I think?
Right.
Like...
You're like, we've written them off.
Right. Like, right? You and I always say this, like, you can't morality shame Republicans into doing the right thing. It's just not going to happen, right?
That's true.
Like, Mitch McConnell knows that there's people dying, and he still is not, he's doing everything he can to not pass stimulus checks.
And just to be clear, there's a giant difference between elected Republicans and average Joe and Jane Republican voters who actually there is a prayer to, appeal to their economic interest and say, no, you don't get it. Like, we have the same interests a lot of the time, But yes, for Republican politicians, as you say, it's like you write them off. They're too far gone. Of course they're too far gone.
Yeah. They're never going to be on your side. You're never going to flip them over into believing what you believe. So what's the point? But like you said, Republican voters, you speak to them directly. You say, this is what I believe, that you deserve health care, and guess what? It's going to be less for you. It's going to cost less for you. I believe you do deserve a $15 minimum wage because you're working 40 hours a week. And I know that people always say that a minimum wage job is just for teenagers working at McDonald's, but that's not the world we live in. So don't believe that. And so, like I said, I think you talk to people that you believe you can get and try to flip them over to your side. If they don't agree, whatever, you had the conversation, you tried. But I like to speak directly to Democrats and to progressives, because one, I feel like I can have an influence over them, and they have complete control of government right now. So there's no point in talking about Lindsey Graham or Mitch McConnell. There's no point. The Democrats can do whatever they want. If they want to pass things through budget reconciliation, they can do that. So so this whole like, why aren't you talking to Republicans thing anymore? It doesn't work. It's an excuse that doesn't work anymore, and I'm loving it. And to me, this isn't a game. Like, if the Democrats do things, if Joe Biden passes universal health care,
Mm-hmm.
Great.
100% credit.
Yeah.
100 like great. Like it's not I'm not doing this because I just want, to shit on the Democrats all the time. I do that because the Democrats are supposed to be on our side. They're supposed to be, and they're not. And I can feel like I have an ability and a platform to try and move them to the correct position. So that's what I'm going to try and do.
Do you feel like there's an extra level of vitriol directed at Black people who dare to speak out? Because I saw like even Charlemagne in that interview, even asking the question, the level of backlash that he got, I was like, really?
I think it's when you look at the history of this country, right, and just the state that we're in right now, Black people have always felt the brunt of the system the most. I mean, right? And so when I'm speaking out against Democrats and against, if progressives aren't speaking truth to power to Joe Biden, it's because I know that in a lot of the communities that my parents came from and a lot of people that look like me come from are decrepit, need the most help out of anybody. And if you talk about something like climate change and climate justice or something like COVID, the disproportionate amount of people dying from that are Black and brown people, right? And a lot of it is become from the environmental injustice and, all the pollutants in the air, and then COVID-19 is a respiratory disease, right? Or condition. So when I talk and I speak and I advocate, it's coming from a place that I know if I'm in LA, 90% of the homeless people I see are Black. If I go to the mission in LA and I'm at this a homeless shelter and I speak to the people, they say, well, yeah, 95% of people that come through here are Black. So a lot of these issues are Black issues. So me as a Black man, I'm going to be advocating for people that look like me, that come from communities that my parents came from, and my advocacy is going to be on the behalf of them. And if you don't like that, then you can fuck off.
Well said.
Are you cognizant of how your role and your position as an NFL running back, how that in some ways, thinking specifically here about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in some ways that actually got you more attention and she was willing to take you more seriously? Because, if it's me or if it's Jimmy, and we got a long list of problematic things that we've said all over the years, so it's like it's easy to just dismiss us as like they're loud mouths, that's what they do. But when you chimed in, all of a sudden she was like, I got to respond because I take him seriously.
Right.
So do you feel like that position gives you leeway in a way? Like now you're almost expected to be a leader. Like, is it a benefit or is it a downside? Do you feel like heavy is the crown, where's the crown, or whatever the saying is, or what? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I feel that. And I was so happy to be able to get AOC to respond. And if I can lend that to the movement, great. If they're more willing to respond to me than others, fine and awesome. I just want, like I said, to push this agenda forward. And if you have almost 1 million subscribers, Jimmy has almost 1 million subscribers, Rising has, like, if they're not willing to respond to y'all, but I have 100,000 followers and some people know me because of football, like, but she's willing to respond to me, I don't understand that. A lot more of her constituency falls under the umbrella of, y'all, but that's fine. If I can bring them to the table, that's what I want to do. I do feel like I see sometimes, and I text you all the time and ask you a lot of questions because I am kind of new to this, and I try and dive deep into it and learn a lot more about it, but I feel like I don't know all the things that I could know. Obviously, a lot of people probably feel that way too, but if I'm using my voice and my platform, I want to make sure it's from a knowledgeable place, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'm like, oh, should I say this? I just don't know if there's more I'm not thinking, putting to it. And then it's like, oh, well, then he's just like, he's just a football player, dumb football. I've got that too a lot of times. And I mean, that is what it is.
Shut up and play.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Laura Ingraham said that. Yeah, to LeBron.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, you get a little bit of that too, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. But I just want to make sure I'm coming from a place of knowledge. And that's why I lean on, people that have been in the space for a lot longer to help me out on that front.
But, I think there's also like part of the game is convincing people that they're too stupid to understand what's really going on.
That is true.
You just don't understand, and so you're misinformed. Well-intentioned, Justin, but misinformed. And I think that actually that sense of sort of condescension, it works for a lot of people to have them keep quiet and just say, oh, I just don't really understand, I guess, what's going on here, so I better trust the experts.
Yeah, the thing I think is important too is I even though I'm on Twitter a lot and I do learn a lot about this stuff, I operate in my daily life very much so outside of the political atmosphere.
Right.
A lot of people I talk to, whether it's my college friends, whether it's, my NFL teammates, or, just going back home, they don't pay attention to politics. And this is why Force the Vote for me was so big, is that right now, when there's not a lot of sports, there's no concerts, people aren't, people are, but aren't, traveling out. Like in America, usually it's so hard to get people to pay attention, right? And right now we have people paying attention. And so you have to use that, like the corporate Democrats, like the Republicans, always use spectacle to get people to agree with them. And so I'm saying let's use a spectacle to, shine a light on the fact that we're the only only developed country that doesn't have universal health care. This pandemic is whooping our ass. Our people in power seem to have no plan, and they're still not willing to back a program, a legislation that will catch us up to the rest of the world. And so I think that's why we have to start using spectacle, because for me, it's hard to go out and talk to people. Like the craziest thing can happen. Like everyone's talking about on Twitter, and I go and no one even knows what's going on. No one even knows it's happening. You know what I mean? So you have to take advantage when you have the advantage. You have to take those situations and use them, and to just try and get people to, stoke the consciousness of people and get people more to start to agree with you.
Yeah.
Would you ever run for office?
I don't know. It is enticing in the sense that, like, if I went to DC, it's like I'm not making no friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
I
if
live
I don't
here.
have to,
I'll be your friend, Justin.
I'm not here to make friends. Let's say that.
Yeah.
I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to get things passed that are gonna, help the communities that I come from, the communities that my parents come from. But I just don't know. I don't know. I really like to be more on the activist side. Like, that's what gives me a lot of energy. Like, if I can organize like a rent relief fund or something like that, or organize a strike or something like that, like organize a protest, that really gets me going. So I don't know. We'll see. I won't rule it out, but right now I don't have any.
You like being the outside bomb thrower.
Yeah, I do. I really do. And I think that I have a platform for that.
You do.
And I think I know there's a lot of people that are going to be running for Congress and going to be running for these positions that I can give a platform to. And if I can do that and amplify those voices, maybe it'll be better than me just doing it myself.
You thinking about anything specific there?
So maybe some progressive talk.
Yeah, maybe a little progressive YouTube show, something like that.
I'd watch that.
Yeah. On that front, yeah, I will be. I'm in the midst of getting things together to start that. So I'll probably announce something like that at the end of the week.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
Stay tuned.
I'm
That
so
is
sorry
amazing.
you just got fired from the NFL.
Hey, we'll see. I've got to set up my life for afterwards.
What does it look like when you're in season? Like, what does your week look like? Are you able to follow politics as much? Like, how do you maintain that balance?
It really is difficult.
Yeah.
Because football, like in season, it's almost like having two full-time jobs. Like we travel a lot, obviously. During the week, I'm pretty much at the facility for 10 to 11 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you got to go home, watch film, and then you got to go to sleep early. You got to make sure you're staying. Like your mind is always focused on it. So I do, obviously try and keep up as much as I can. I usually don't tweet as much just because my mind is just in other places, just focused on, what I have to do that week. But I try and balance it as much as I can. And, if I do, or when I do end up doing my show, it probably would end up being like maybe once a week. But that's why I'm trying to, kind of take advantage of the time I have now, which is nice. Out of season, I work out pretty much every day, but that, might be a few hours a day, and the rest of the day, I'm free. And so that's why I want to, use this time to advocate, enlighten people. And my biggest thing is going to be like I feel like people are so close.
Mm-hmm.
People are so like, they understand the game's rigged. They understand the system's rigged, but they don't really know the solutions.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so that's where really where I want to focus is bringing people that maybe like me for football or for other reasons, from my hometown, just get those people to see like, wow, like I never looked at it like that, and just enlighten people and stoke their consciousness, because I think the more we move along here, the more we get more people on our side, and it's going to take a lot, right, to actually beat back the system. It's going to take a lot of people on the ground, an upswell of support on the ground to actually to get these things passed, but it's going to take that pressure.
So I'm interested as well in sort of the mechanics of your day-to-day, and one of the questions that I keep thinking of is, are you, as a professional football player, are you guided from leadership and management, or is like the discipline sort of incumbent upon you? You know what I mean? Like, how much is it a system versus you?
It's both. So if you're in a system, like a very disciplined organization, like say like the Patriots or like the Steelers or just some of these like very storied franchises that are pretty much are built on discipline, that helps too. But just as an NFL player in general, where it differs from college a lot is in college you're very guided. You have over 100 people on a team. You're 18 to 21 years old. A lot of the younger people are just very immature coming in, and you got a lot to learn. When you get to the NFL, it's like, no, like if you want to get treatment, that's on you, right?
Yeah, you're a grown
like
up now.
you're a grown up. Yeah, like if you want to go outside and you want to work out in the off season, that's on you. You know what I mean? Whereas in college, it's like you have a program. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it is different in that sense where like you're a professional, and if you're not getting the job done, we'll just go find someone else that will. You know what I mean? And so you have to stay on your P's and Q's, and it's our job. It's my job, right? It's y'all's job to do this. Well, it's my job, to play football, be a professional athlete. And so every single day, even if it is the off season, I'm like, okay, waking up, what can I do to help myself prepare for, eventually for camp or for OTAs and stuff like that.
Do you feel like the mental toughness that you've gotten from being a professional athlete translates into some of the toughness and strength that you show also in the political arena?
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes that. I think it takes taking a risk, right? Just and a lot of things about sports in general, it's like you gotta take risks, right? Like you just got, and when it's tough to explain, but like when you're in the arena and like, the crowd's going crazy, it's super loud. It's like, it almost calms me. It almost, like, cause I can't think. It's so loud. You can't think. Like you just
shuts off your brain.
And you just go out there and do it.
Flow state.
Exactly.
At the zone. You're in the zone.
You're in the zone. And so when I bring that to politics, I think of like, there's always going to be a lot of people in your ear telling you that what you're doing isn't right. That you shouldn't be fighting this fight, or you're going too hard on them, you're all this type of stuff. But I always go back to the point of, if you're fighting for the right thing, and if you have justice and you have the leverage of the people on your side, then it doesn't matter all the outside noise. All the outside noise is just that. It's outside noise. And so that's what I really want to implore the progressives in Congress to do, is that, and like Nina Turner says, that's why I love listening to Nina Turner. It's like, you go in there to fight for the people, and you always say it, like, it's gonna take you being hated by the media, right? Because the media is there to support the establishment,
right?
And so if you're hated by the media, that's a good thing.
Good. Bathe in it.
That's a great thing.
Bathe in it.
And their opinions don't matter. What matters is I go back to my district, and those people are happy that I'm fighting for them because they need help, and I'm there to help them. And so whatever fears they have of whether it's the media or intra-party, right, their own party not liking them, that's okay. That's all just outside noise. You're there, you're in that arena to fight for the people. And so that's why I'm always so hard on them, because I know they have the potential to do that. I don't think Nancy Pelosi has the potential to do that. But I think AOC and Ilhan Omar, I think they have the potential to do that. And that's why I stay on them, because I don't want them to fall into where 26 years from now, like Nancy Pelosi in 94, she's asking for single payer and a vote, right. And then 26 years later, she's the one that is she has the power to bring it to the floor, and she won't do it, right? Like, I want to make sure that's not them, because I was so excited when they were elected, and I think a lot of us lefties were, and especially when Bernie was, had his run, like we were all together and we were all pushing on the same front. And I think if they can be turned into like, okay, here's a strategy we have. We need y'all to back us up so we can get this done. Then we'll all be together again doing that. You know what I mean? But if they're not gonna, and it almost feels like they aren't cohesive enough together to have a cohesive strategy that we can all get behind. So that's why there's all this different fighting and everyone has their own strategy and all this stuff. So I'm just hoping that we can come together and they can lead us on that.
That answer was amazing because you actually answered my question before I asked it. I was going to ask, does football provide like a calmness or a flow state for you? And then I was also going to ask as a follow-up, does politics sort of give you the same feeling, like that zone-like feeling? You know what I mean?
It does, and that's why, and it's really more on the activism side, like I said earlier, that gives me that like rush. Like I feel like no matter, sometimes, because it's easy to be on Twitter, it's easy to like see all the things that people are saying and be like, and almost like second guess, like, man, maybe I shouldn't believe this. But it's like, no, there's always going to be those detractors. There's always going to be that outside noise. And if you feel like what you're doing is just and right, then none of that matters. And I think I get some of that from football in the sense that when you're at a an away stadium, when I play at Northwestern, we go play at Penn State, there's 100,000 fans all in white, and it's just us 70 people on the sideline. It does feel like it's us against the world. And tell me how that is in the progressive movement.
You're used to being everything stacked against you and everyone around hating you.
Exactly. And it's like you just relish in it, and it makes it even more fun, and it makes it even that more satisfying when you win. And I think that's why the whole GameStop thing is so now everyone feels at it, because it's like the little guy finally won, right?
Like
right. Exactly. Yeah. Despite all the barriers that we have, we actually got over that hurdle and won. So I think that can be the progressive movement, but we have to find a way to come together. We have to find a way for progressives in the House to actually start fighting the power and not coalesce to all the interests and all the pressures that come with being in DC.
What are you going to do for the Super Bowl?
I'll actually probably just chill. I don't know. Like, I mean, I do love watching the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And it's weird because like, now that my season's over, it's like sometimes I forget football's still going. Because
really?
I'm so in. I mean, it's like you have to get away from it.
Yeah.
And obviously, if I was in the playoffs, like you're in it, right?
Of course.
And so. But after the season, it's like you have to get away from it a little bit, because for 6 straight months, I'm waking up at 5:45 and I'm like, football.
Eat, sleep, breathe it.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I get away from it, it's like a little bit of just take a deep breath and kind of bathe in just being a regular human being again. But I do love the Super Bowl, and I think it's going to be a great one. Mahomes is going to be one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. He's already on the way.
But sort of fuck him though.
But yeah, he plays for KC. So it's like, it's tough because like I love the game and I love watching just amazingly skilled players. But it's also like the guys in my division. Like fuck. But hey, we got a good one ourselves. Herbert is he's unreal. He's a really good dude. So.
Do you start to get itchy when it's been a while since you've played?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I took like 2 weeks off and I'm like, I gotta work out.
I'm like that with eating McDonald's. When it's been a while, I'm like, damn, I really want to eat some McDonald's.
Really similar vibe.
Yeah, but usually by like March, I'm like, I'm like itching. I'm like, I can't wait to get back out there. And it's like, well, then you get to the season, it's like, oh my God, 4 more months of this, like
it's grueling. Right?
It's grueling. It is, and it's like, especially if you have any type of injury, then it's like, and it's just a sense of impermanence. Like, I mean, that's what the NFL is. You can be great one day, and then the next day. You blow your knee out, you're done.
How do you think about longevity, or do you think about that? Or do you just like...
You almost can't. You almost can't, because if you're out there, and this is the whole thing about the toughest part about playing hurt, like obviously you have some type of physical barrier, but it's really the mental. It's really the mental, because you don't feel 100% like yourself. And you're at the level where like if you're not 100% yourself, it's already hard enough being 100% yourself just to excel at the NFL level. So it is tough, but you just got to be in the moment. You can't be out there thinking about longevity past the fact that you protect yourself when you can. But you just got to go out there and play. And it's like, once it's done, it's done. I've been playing since I was 8. What's that? 16 years now. I'm towards the tail end of my football career, and that's okay. I'm at peace with that. But every single opportunity I get on the field,
you're giving it all.
You give it everything you got, and it's fun. It's a game, but it's also what I do, and it's what I love.
Funny enough, that's actually one of the things Kobe said. He kept getting the question after he retired. People were like, "You miss it, right? Like, you're Kobe Bryant. You miss it, right?" And every time he was like, "I don't even miss it a little bit."
Really?
Yes, and his reasoning was, when I was out there, I gave it 100% every second. So since he did everything he could when he was out there, he's like, I'm letting the chips fall where they may, and I'm good now. And then he moved on, and he was doing things that he found fulfilling. He was creating documentaries and whatnot. So and by the way, that's why I'm wearing purple, because Kobe. It was Kobe died yesterday, I think it was, or the 26th was. Yeah. So that's why I'm wearing purple today.
Yeah, that was a tough.
You met him actually.
I did.
Yeah.
And that I don't get starstruck a lot. I really don't. Kobe's one of those people, where
he's like a demigod.
He just was unbelievable. I mean, just his mindset. And it's so, like, it's, when you look at it from the outside, it's like, okay, yeah, I understand that Mamba mentality, but like actually putting that into practice when you're at, the highest levels of a sport, it's just so hard.
Complete obsession.
And the greatest thing that I felt when I met him was that he came and talked to our team, a bunch of NFL players, right? And we're all looking like, oh, let's go. So, like, we're all, even like Phillip Rivers is like, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And he's like, oh, let's go. So we're all starstruck. I mean, he's like one of those figures. But even afterwards, he stayed and he talked to anybody who wanted to talk to them. He gave them all the attention in the world. And the thing about being like a public figure, and I'm nowhere near Kobe Bryant, but like if I go back to my hometown or I go back to Northwestern, like, you're going to get people that just stop and want to talk to you and all stuff. And it's hard when you're living your own life and experiencing your own life to, like, step into that, like...
Yeah, you got to flip the switch in your mind.
Right. Yeah. To, like, be... like you don't want to give. That might be the only time one of your fans meets you, right?
Yeah, right.
So you don't want to give them a bad impression, like, oh, this guy's an asshole. You know what I mean? So it's hard to always keep that kind of like level-headedness, even if you're having a bad day. Kind of like you said, flip the switch. But Kobe made it look easy. He was just like, it was just unbelievable. He had this aura around him where you could tell all he wanted to do was like impart his, like, share his knowledge, impart his wisdom upon, like, even us who didn't play the same sport but kind of are in the same arena. And so that was incredible. And it was just such a, Los Angeles was gloomy for a while. And you can just feel it. And I'm in Orange County, which is like not even like maybe like an hour outside of LA. And it was like, even we felt it down there. So it was a tough moment, but.
Do you get to see like the difference in the way different guys sort of try to achieve that flow state and how they handle the mental game?
No, it's so unique. Like even like before the game, like some people like won't talk to anybody and just, like are by themselves in their zone. And some people love talking to people.
Which are you?
I feel like I kind of go in between both. Like sometimes, some games I'm just like, let me just put my headphones on. And sometimes I'm just like, let me just talk to Austin, have a conversation, and just laugh or whatever. But when it comes to actually on the field, I kind of turn into kind of how I am in the political arena, where it's like I'm very talkative, I'm very upbeat, energetic, like I'm talking to everybody. And then when it's like just during the normal week, I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. Like
that's fine.
I'm just like kind of going about my business. Like, I'm still, conversating and talking to, all my teammates and stuff, but it's just I turn into like a different person
right
in game day.
That's
I think that goes back to like introvert extrovert too. Like if somebody's naturally extroverted, when they get in that comfort zone, they want to bounce ideas off people and whatnot, Whereas I'm deeply introverted, even though people are surprised to hear that because I talk for a living. But like I'm off before I go to like do whatever, do a debate or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I'm shut down for an hour. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me.
Yeah.
The only person allowed in my general vicinity is Corin at that time, and Corin knows the deal. He's like, I'm gonna shut the fuck up because Kyle's got that look on right now. So yeah, it varies from person to person, but it is interesting how that psychology kind of varies massively.
Yeah. Well, we are so grateful to you for flying out and being here. This is my first time getting to meet you, which I was really, really excited about.
And I feel like we know each other.
I definitely feel like we know each other. And, I feel like your voice is so incredibly powerful and important. And it's actually rare when people recognize the power that they have and then they seek to use it as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. And just to people like y'all, like, that helped me learn so much, right? Coming from a place of kind of political ignorance. That's why I appreciate just the lefty media space in general, because I think it's so necessary, right? Like, we finally have something that can beat back against the establishment, against CNN, against MSNBC, Fox, New York Times, right? We actually have real people that are informing, people on the ground. And that's why I want to join, right? I want to join that space so I can use my platform, like you said, to fight for things that we deserve. Man, Americans work so hard, right? Like, Americans deserve to have healthcare, deserve to have their basic needs met. And so that's a place where I come from. I grew up, knowing that, we were middle class, but we're one health emergency away from,
like so many
bankruptcy,
people,
like so many people. And just living with that stress, living with that anxiety, it's super unhealthy. And I think it pushes us as Americans to a place of where we're so combative, where we're so tribalized, we're so, separated. And I'm hoping that the show and my show and y'all show, we can continue to spread the message and remedy that. So I appreciate you having me on.
Of course.
Thank you.
Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at J_manprime21. And I mostly post football stuff on Instagram, but JJPrime21. And I'll be announcing something later this week.
Maybe a little something else, right? Maybe a little something on YouTube coming or
maybe
whatnot.
Maybe a little something on YouTube. You guys, stay tuned and we'll see.
All right, thanks, man. We appreciate
it. Thank
y'all.
you, Justin. What was interesting from that was actually something that you picked up on, which is that the way Justin approaches politics, which shouldn't be unusual, but actually is very policy focused. So rather than like the personality game or the super partisan game, it's just, no, here are my issues, here's what I care about, and I'm going to analyze who's best on those things.
So I'm actually a long-term optimist on that point, because I think that all you have to do is scratch just beneath the surface and you can get almost anybody to that point. Because you're right, there's so much BS and there's so much culture war nonsense, and people get mired in all the wrong things, and they get led down a bad path, whether it's from mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever, even friends and family, like they'll just be led down a bad path. But if you could talk to somebody face to face, I find that it's very easy to get them to like have a light bulb moment of like, wait, yeah, all these things I'm thinking about and caring about are nonsense. Like, they're totally useless. Who cares about Ted Cruz's personality or AOC's personality or whatever it is? No, it's about the substance. It's about what are they actually doing? And Justin, you're right. He's unique in the sense that he didn't need anybody to say to him, like, this is what you should care about. When he actually sat down and reflected on it, he was like, yeah, no, this is what politics is. Politics is about policy. And so, you're right. It's unique, but at least I'm optimistic in the long term that you can get most people to that point. Would you say you're optimistic, or are you more pessimistic that like we're always going to be in this position where it's always going to be culture war garbage and it's always, you know what I mean? What do you think?
This week I feel optimistic, and I have to say it's because of the GameStop thing that I feel optimistic. Truly.
I know, it makes sense. I'm
Seriously.
laughing, but it's a happy laugh.
Because it's the first thing in the, since the Trump era began that I can think of where you really had it was the people versus the elites. Mm-hmm. And everybody was like, fuck those guys. We see exactly what's going on. And so it was like this weird unifying moment, or I guess the better way to put it is it was divisive, but along the right lines, not along like partisan, tribal, stupid culture war lines, but actually along like class lines. And so in that way, I do actually feel hopeful. And I don't know that it's an accident that happened relatively quickly after Trump was out of office, because Trump is such a singularly polarizing figure that when he's around, if he was still president, somehow this all would have ended up about Donald Trump.
That's such a good point.
100%, right? He would have tweeted something, he would have said something, executive order, people on the right be like, see, he's on the people's side, and Democrats would have said something stupid, or on the, who knows what he would have done. But somehow it would have ended up being all about Donald Trump, and then everybody's just right back to their corner. So I don't think it's an accident that these little glimmers of sort of like unity amongst the people are occurring after he's gone.
Yeah, but let me ask you, what do you think happens now? Because they're pulling out every trick in the book to try to like take all the energy out of this thing, deflate the tires, like whatever we can, throw the kitchen sink at them. Collusion behind the scenes, elitist cabal, like it's insane how far they're going.
Blatant.
So, but what happens in response is this actually going to be a moment of like, no, seriously, fuck these guys, and we rise up in some way? And if so, what way are we rising up? How are we rising up?
Right. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's the thing.
I don't think anyone can know. I think
Right.
the only thing you can say for sure is we already had this year where everyone was getting screwed except the very top. And I mean, if you look at the graphs and the data, it is just completely clear. These hedge funds, Matt Taibbi crunched the data. These hedge funds had their best year in a decade while everybody else was like dying and starving. So we already had this sense of realization on that front. We also had this sense of realization that like, oh, if the government wants to do something to make my life easier, they can. This whole idea that like the government is irrelevant and you're on your own and they can't possibly help, so don't even consider it, that's also out the window. And now you have this experience of, look, I'm like you. I thought, maybe I'm going a little too far with how rigged the system is. Now I'm like, I wasn't going far enough. And everyone in the country is seeing how rigged it truly is in like an explicit way, like out in the open type of way. I think those shifts in consciousness have to add up to something. What that something is, who the hell knows? You couldn't have predicted this thing. Like, you can't predict any of these events specifically, but does it add up to something and change the direction of the country in some way? Yeah, I think it has to.
I'm just scared that we can't necessarily make the leaps to the thing that I think is probably the real solution, which is like a general strike. How do you build the bridge from what's happening here all the way to a general strike? I mean, that seems like mission impossible to me, but but you're right that they're so brazen with it now, and that you get like the Barstool guy agreeing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Like anybody who's even like one step removed from the real power centers are like, fuck this. This is bullshit.
Totally.
So what do you do with that? How do you take that energy and just harness it for something that's incredibly positive? And I will tell you that the pessimistic view on it is that what happens is they pull out all the stops and use all the tricks, and then they win. And the energy, it might still be there, but the energy can be directed where people turn on each other again, and you're right back to the partisan bickering. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's almost definitely going to happen. That's like almost certainly going to happen. But that doesn't mean that that's the end. Right,
yeah.
Because these things build on each other, right? These moments of social consciousness and awareness and reshaping and realization build on each other. So that's why I say, like, it's chaos theory. You can't predict what the next flashpoint will be and whether it will be in a productive direction or a dramatically unproductive direction. But you can say that something important, significant has been revealed here. That's part of why they're so mad, by the way, that something significant has been revealed here, and other things of significance about our economy and how fake it all is and how rigged it all is have been revealed over the past year. And I just don't think there's any real going back from that. Yeah,
the thing that sticks out to me is the performance aspect of it all, like the civility politics angle of it all, where they're so desperate now, they're at the point where they're relying on like, okay, but these guys wear the suits and ties, and these guys are posting rude things on message boards. So obviously you got to go with the suit and tie guys, right? Right? Everybody with us?
These guys have naughty language. We can't be with them.
That's literally that. They've had to go to that point because it's so obvious that.
Well, the other ploy that they're trying is like, we're just concerned about their best interests. I don't think they really understand. We just want to protect them from getting hurt. Somebody's going to get caught holding the bag, and we just want to make sure that the little guy is ultimately protected, which is just such bullshit. You didn't care when they were getting screwed out of their homes and, left for dead this entire. You didn't care. Now suddenly, we're really worried that they don't understand what's going on here. No, actually, you guys are the ones that don't really understand what's going on here.
And it's also total mask off moment for the media. Like, I mean, CNBC. And actually, but
such clowns.
They had this moment in 08 and 09 too, though, because I remember they were in the middle of the crash. They were inviting on the CEOs of the companies that were doing all the terrible stuff with the subprime mortgages and making every bad decision in the book. They were inviting them on, and they were saying like, there's not even going to be a recession, bro. And they were airing this as if like, I'm now talking to an objective expert about what's happening right now. And it's like, how does everybody not get on the same page now and just, I don't even know what I would advocate for, so I'll bite my tongue. But you really do feel, at a moment like this, you really do feel like Viva la Revolution, you know?
Yes, you definitely do. I mean, if you zoom out a little bit, there's this thing in economics called ultimatum theory that you probably have heard of, where basically like they do this experiment. You have two people and you give one person $100 and they're allowed to divide it however they want. And so the prediction, if all humans are just total like rational machines, is that no matter what the distribution is, you're going to accept it as long as it's more than zero. So if they give you 1 penny, okay, then they get to keep the other $99.99. You're still 1 penny better off, so sure, you should accept it. But in practice, what actually happens is people reject any distribution that's somewhere less than 30%. So they're willing to accept some level of inequality. They're not expecting it to be perfectly equal. But if you screw them over too much, they would rather get nothing than see you benefit to that extraordinarily unfair degree. And that's basically where we are right now. People are like, fuck you. I would be willing to pay to see you suffer. And that's the energy in the country. And that is what comes out and surfaces in a moment like this.
And that's actually reflected really well when you look at the CEO to average worker pay ratio over the years. Like you go back to like the 1980s. Don't quote me on these numbers, guys. It's been a long time since I've read these facts, but it was like 40-1 or thereabouts, something like that. CEO paid average worker pay. Now we're at a place where it's over 300-1, and like there are consequences to that. When you look at the numbers with the COVID depression, as I'm calling it, the job losses are 4 times more than in the Great Recession, and that was a historic event. You know what I mean? Yeah. I remember graduating into that economy and everybody looked around and was like, what the fuck do we do now? Like, there are no jobs. There are no jobs. There's no opportunity. Everybody's, filled to the brim with debt. And now we're talking about a situation where there's 4 times more job loss. Like, there's gonna be problems associated with that. And you can either harness that energy for good or harness that energy for bad. And, it is a scary moment in the sense that, and Trump was a great example of this. It's like, if you're either going to go populist right or populist left in a moment like this, there's no back to normal status quo. And Joe was able to sort of squeak by, I think underperforming, but he was able to squeak in because the populist right example was a total fraud and he didn't do stuff that help people, but then you it's almost like a brief back to normal period, back to normal. And then again, Jesus Christ. I mean, fucking Carrot Top could get elected with how crazy shit is now, right? Like anybody can get elected with this shit, because look, everything's society is showing itself to be like this one giant joke at this point. You know what I mean?
I want to know what went on in your brain when you reached for the Carrot Top example.
Oh, I didn't have to reach for it. It was just right there.
That's not a person I've thought about in a long time.
I'm brilliant. What do you want me to tell you?
The thing about Trump is that he played the part of the populist. And the best thing about him, and I always say this, is the people he pissed off. Like the way that people freaked out, whether it was financial elites or media elites, political elites, like the meltdown that they had was the best thing about Trump. But then when he's in office, no one did better than those exact people. He
gave them everything they wanted.
And not only did he give them everything, like even you look at the media that, went out and every day, every story, Trump is bad, everything is about Trump. They benefited tremendously. Ratings went up. People wrote books. People made careers. People made millions off it. This was amazing for them. So in every regard, he turns out to be like the anti-elite who is remarkably amazing for elites. And so, yeah, complete fraud on that front. But, to bring it back around to Justin, I do think there's something very important, and it may seem simple, but I actually think it is relatively profound, that if you want to win people and I think this is what makes him different, is like he's actually in the locker room having these conversations with people who see things really differently from him and come from a different place, but who he knows and trusts are basically decent people trying to figure this shit out. And he's both in the online world, in the Twitter sphere, and not. So he has connectivity between both places. So he has this just super practical, pragmatic view about how to talk about these issues. focusing on the policy, taking the personalities out of it, taking the partisan polarization out of it, and just hey, here's what's up with healthcare, here's what's up with trade, here's what's up with war. It's so clear to me that that is absolutely the best way to ultimately win people over.
And America loves sports. So since America loves sports, I'm actually very interested to see what the perception is in regards to him when he gets into progressive talk all the time. Because, yes, we look back, people look at Muhammad Ali, for example. Now, Justin would say, don't you dare make that comparison because he's the greatest ever, right? So I'm not necessarily making a direct comparison, but what I am saying is people looked back on Muhammad Ali and realized that his political activism was actually perhaps the most heroic thing about him. Yes, he was the greatest in the ring and he's remembered for his boxing accolades, but it is also, America loves sports, they love athletes, and then they love a good character arc and story. And so Muhammad Ali is viewed as a hero. It could go in that direction for somebody like Justin, where he's more accepted because he also had that foot in through the sports world. You know what I mean? If you come up purely through politics, it's easy to hate you. On either side, it is. It's easy to hate you on either side because it's so easy to make a caricature out of you. If you're coming from a totally different avenue, if you're coming from professional sports, you are sort of given a little bit of a pass in the sense that America says, well, first and foremost, I put you in that box already. So if you're going to step outside of that box, I do think it might be a little bit of a grace period where people are willing more to listen. But again, it could go either way. That's why I'm curious to see how it unfolds, because it is also possible that it becomes a shut up and dribble thing where people are like, no, the exact opposite. We want you to only do that thing and shut the fuck up. Right. You know what I mean? So I'm curious to see how that goes. But I think there are enough examples of athletes who got politically involved and then people realize oh, that's the heroic shit that ultimately they ended up winning in the eyes of, public perception.
But sometimes that takes a long time.
For sure, yeah.
In the moment, I mean, now
Villain.
we look back and we're like, hero. But at the time, villain, right? Completely villainized because I think there is a recognition of the special cultural power that athletes have. And so in the initial response is vigorous opposition and demonization and vilification. So it makes people uncomfortable, right? You aren't doing just the thing that we want you to do, and you actually have this power and you recognize you have this power and you're using it in ways that are scary for us as a elite class, the people who have the levers of power in the country. So I'm excited though to see what he's up to. I think, he's an incredibly important voice, as I told him. And it really is a very unusual thing when people recognize the moment and feel a responsibility in that moment to use the little pieces of power and little bits of leverage that they ultimately have. Yeah.
And honestly, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. One of my favorite guests for sure. Very conversational, very easy to talk to. And I think he gets it in a way that not many people get it. And so, what that turns into, we'll have to wait and see. But, he's a special guy.
For sure. Thank you guys for watching or listening or whatever you're doing this week. And if you want the video on Fridays, subscribe on Substack. But actually, we didn't make this clear before. You can subscribe on Substack for $5 to get the video, or you can just subscribe and you'll get all the newsletters and everything, but for free, and you'll get the audio on Saturday still. Yeah, there's two ways to subscribe. You can subscribe for free, and then you'll get the emails when the free audio drops, which people, they want to hear it one way or another, whether they listen to it or they watch it. So it's $5 a month and you'll get the video, or like you said, if you could sign up for free for the newsletter, and then you'll know exactly when the audio drops every single week. Yeah. All right. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.